You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Orla Chennaoui.
Hello, Richard.
Again, it's December.
Woo woo! Happy Christmas. Nearly.
Well, for this...
Get into the spirit, Grinch.
The voice really dropped there as if you weren't sure.
I wasn't sure of my singing ability, so I thought I was hoping you would drown me out there.
Maybe we'll play out this month with you singing a Christmas song. I think that might be the only way we can get people to listen right to the end. You can obviously skip forward.
Switch off now.
Okay, this month's Cycling Podcast Féminin, is it episode 7?
It is episode 7, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, for this month's episode, it's a little bit different. The focus is normally on racing. It's not really on racing. Is it on racing this?
Well, it's only focused on racing if we accept that I beat you.
A bit of racing. Well,
I rolled into the cafe first. Oh no, I didn't actually. I think you did. Damn.
You slid down that hill ahead of me quite impressively. But we'll get onto that in a moment. The focus this month is on riding, and there's 3 parts. In the first part, you'll hear a ridiculous day out that we had in Kent with Dame Kelly Holmes, a former runner. Double Olympic gold medalist in Athens 2004, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
800, 1500 metre runner, but she's become a cyclist and a pretty accomplished one at that. And these were all her local roads in Kent. And we went for a ride with some other women, me tagging along, trying to look inconspicuous.
All 6 foot, what of you?
3. So we'll hear from that fun day out soon. Part 2. What's part 2 again? Oh,
part 2 is a training camp in
Training camp in Girona.
Oh, Girona, sorry.
Pay attention.
Sorry.
So our friend Nathalie Thomas, who's a financial business journalist with the Financial Times, friend of the podcast, she went out to Girona for a women's only training camp with Marijn de Vries, the retired Dutch professional rider, running training camps out there, including for the first time a women's only one. So she went on that and took a little audio diary of the occasion. Part 3, we'll go into greater distances. We'll hear from Emily Chappell, who was a bike courier originally, but has become an ultra distance rider, racer. Took part in the Transcontinental Race, which is part of a sort of growing movement of ultra distance events, which are quite interesting. And I think we want to cover a bit more of that in 2017 as well. But without further ado, Orla, should we head into the Kent countryside?
Let's do it. Let's get on our bikes.
Good. Orla.
Richard.
This is my first women's sportive. Any tips?
You're doing very well, Rachel. No tips except you might need to retouch your lippy, but it's holding out okay.
What is? I mean, you've dragged me along into darkest Kent. I think it is. It is lovely roads. Quite a lot of fast drivers. But tell us about the event, Orla.
Well, it's an event that's been organised by Specialised, and they do a series of sort of group rides for women only.
Sorry, will I let you get your breath?
Yeah, we're going up a little hill here. No, you've thrown me off course. What was I saying? It's a women's only ride organised by Specialised. It's been led by Dame Kelly Holmes, double Olympic champion, of course, middle distance runner, who's just taken up cycling in the last year. So she's sort of heading up this participation drive to get more women into cycling. And I've been chatting to a few of the ladies here about why women-only events, why it makes a difference. And I think it's just, I don't know how you're finding it so far, Richard. You claim this is your first women's-only event. I'm not quite sure about that. But I don't know how you're finding the atmosphere, but it tends to be when women are riding a little bit more relaxed, less competitive. As I was saying, when I'm out riding with guys, they're always going to notice your kit. They always comment on what's not matching, how the pros do it, whatnot. And with women, it's more about getting out, having fun, chatting, and looking after your body and looking after your mind. So Specialised are getting involved in that. And I thought it'd be a good excuse for me and thee to get out on the road.
I'm finding it pretty hostile, to be honest. I feel a bit self-conscious.
I did notice it's almost like the traditional intimidation in reverse. We're getting pictures taken just outside the cafe where we started to begin with, and Richard sort of slunk off. you didn't want to be pictured with all the ladies, so I think we're managing to intimidate you. But that's not the plan, is it? It's all inclusive. We're embracing everyone. You're doing very well there, Richard, for your first women's only event.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate the encouragement.
You asked for advice. I would give one piece of advice. Tuck that kilt in. You're going to get it caught in your back spokes. So, ladies, we've just done our first climb. How did you find that?
Awesome.
Don't joke, you went flying past me. How did you find it?
Yeah, it was good. Nice warm up. It started off very cold. Needed the hill.
It's good fun, this, isn't it? A women's only ride through the countryside.
It's good to get women out on bikes and just get them riding together, because a lot of women ride with groups of men and they don't actually ride with women, so it's good to get them all together.
How is it different, do you think, riding with women? Is it just, dare I say it, we're slightly slower?
No. It's fun. It's just social, isn't it? It's good. And you've got some really fast girls, so it is quick. It is quick, but it's good just to be able to ride with friends and socialise rather than have men that are just so competitive. Yeah. It's good to ride with girls.
Good. So how much riding do you do then? How normal is this kind of a ride of a Saturday morning?
Very. Weekly. So, now I go out with Sync Up Cycles.
How long have you been cycling for?
2 years.
Oh, right. Why did you get into it then?
Why? With a group of friends locally, we decided we were going to do London to Brighton bike ride, 2014. So I thought, having signed up, I better try and find a bike and try riding it. So I did, found a bike in Decathlon, just a hybrid, and then looked around for rides that I was able to do. And in fact, there was a breeze ride, and Jill, to your left, was actually the breeze ride leader that took me out on my first ever cycle ride.
Jill, talk me through that then. How was her first ever cycle ride?
She was very competent and caring. She had a friend who came out who wasn't quite such a competent cyclist, and she waited for her, as we all waited for her, but she was very encouraging to her friend, and she's been a wonderful cyclist ever since.
And how do you find, from your experience on the road, the number of women out riding these days? And I guess as well of your age group?
There was quite a number of older ladies who have always cycled, always gone to the shops on their cycle, and they want the gentle poodle. They're not obviously into lycra, but there are still some older ladies who go time trialling. You know, that I've got a friend who is just approaching 50, which is not old at all, and all she wants to do is go faster and faster, and now she's getting into time trials, and it's amazing, and it's just like, go girl, yeah, you can do it.
So riding along the beautiful Kent countryside with Dame Kelly Holmes. What a lucky lady that I am. Kelly, why did you get involved in this? What's the point of this kind of a ride?
I got involved with this through Specialise, become one of their ambassadors even though I'm not a cyclist. Mainly because I showed an interest in, well, for me, finding a new sport, doing something that would motivate me to keep fit. And the idea of this is really to bring women together of all different abilities, to get them out riding and show them how good it can be for them in terms of the well-being, fitness, feel-good factor.
So of all sports for you, middle distance, of course, is your first love. Yeah. What is it about cycling? How did you get into it?
Cycling, I just find you feel really free. From a training perspective, really good cardio, keeping the legs strong. From an injury prevention, a lot less impact on the body, so I found I can do it more often. And it's just been enjoyable, the socialising side of it, getting involved in some events that I've done, and I found it, thoroughly exciting.
My name's Mark Brewer. I'm the owner or co-owner of Westrum Cyclery with Michael Craig, who's my business partner, and with a few other investors. I also am the club secretary, and I started, along with Michael, Westrum Cycling Club. I've been cycling for all my life. So if I can get somewhere on a bike, I'll do it. If it's a bit of a drive, then I'll still ride my bike. But since opening the shop, funny enough, I've cycled a lot less. than I'd like to. But we're getting it back.
You were saying earlier that you set a target for the club of a 40-60 split in terms of female-male members. How close are you to achieving that?
We're there.
Women probably make up a third of the membership, maybe a little bit more, but we're seeing more growth in the women into the club, so long may it continue.
You own the cafe where we started this morning, and you've noticed a big customer base, because you own a shop as well, a big customer base among women then, have you?
Massive. I mean, it is, I would say that our business, our revenue stream comes 60% from women, even 70. Just because there are so many women getting into it now, because the men are already doing it. So the biggest growth area is females. As well as the cafe, we have our own cycling club. So we do adults coaching on a Saturday. It's nearly 100% women.
And Lauren, you're a member of this local club. How long have you been riding for?
About 18 months, maybe coming up 2 years. Yeah, probably 2 years since I joined the club in March. Yeah, March, 2 years.
So what got you into it?
I used to go out on my own, on the bike, mountain bike, and then a few friends that I cycled with joined the club, and then I guess progressed to road bike, and then just to go out with other people. It's boring riding on your own, and it's just to go out with other people really.
Do you think it makes a difference? I know that you ride with some guys as well. Do you think it makes a difference when it is women only? Do we need that? I mean, are we in danger of closing it off to men in that way?
Probably some women would prefer women only and are maybe intimidated by riding with the guys. I probably wouldn't say we've got any women riders in our club that would be intimidated by the blokes. Sometimes it's quite nice when you find maybe a male that you're the same standard as and you can ride with them quite competently. I think it gives you a bit of a boost if you know you can maybe sometimes go past one of the guys or that you can ride with them.
I was going to say the thing about our club is we're a non-competitive club. So if you look at other clubs in the area, they're constantly doing sportives and time trials and hill climbs and all that sort of stuff. We haven't quite progressed to that yet because we're still a very young club. We're about 3 years old. Moving forward, we would like to be more competitive, but it's not that important. And I think some clubs are all about the competition, and that's when you get a lot of disparity between men and women, because the men are out, they ride to go fast and to achieve, and therefore they will drop anybody. So that's why we're different. When we ride as a group and we finish as a group.
So you've come from Worcester today. That's a journey of how far?
160 miles.
Man.
Yeah.
And why did you want to come all this way for this ride today?
Well, to start with, obviously, the opportunity to meet Kelly Holmes as well. That was pretty much one of the big things. But also being invited to any opportunity, I kind of see it as, well, a window to anything else potentially. So just great to meet loads of other really keen women riders as well. Because I go out on cycles with a lot of group rides that are just 100% men, sometimes only a woman who turns up, and it's very intimidating. And the more opportunities that women get together to ride and see that there is a community out there to go out with other people, I think hopefully it will just encourage more women to keep going out and see that the opportunities are out there aren't the barriers that they think there are.
Hello, I'm Anne and I'm the Women's Business Manager for Specialised in the UK.
Is that a new position?
No, it was probably made about 4 years ago. One of my ex-colleagues, Olivia, was doing the role. She was brought over from the US, from Specialised Global Head Office, to come in the UK and develop women's cycling for Specialised.
Why? Why was it deemed necessary, I guess profitable, to specialise, if you pardon the verb, in women's cycling?
I just think that there was quite a bit of a boom in cycling in general, especially after Bradley Wiggins winning the Olympics and the Tour de France. And so I think on the back of that, from the men going out cycling, the women also took an interest in it, and we did see a lot of women going from spin cycling to actually thinking, well, I don't really want to be indoors anymore, I actually just want to get out there. And I also feel that with a lot of smartphones, internet and everything, a lot of people are actually seeking to get outdoors and get out there. And one thing that we've actually seen in Specialised and in cycling in general is a lot of the sort of seeking adventure. So we've noticed that the adventure cycling is actually becoming bigger and bigger. quicker. And with overnight stays, sort of mini adventure, micro adventures, people just kind of getting out there. And with women in general, we've definitely seen a huge increase.
So, Kelly, we've done the ride. We've all survived. You've done a little bit you're about to do some yoga for recovery. We've had our sugar and carb hit. How do you think it went?
I think it went really well. Speaking to all the ladies, they seemed really enthused, enjoyed the ride, and I think everybody got out of it what they, came here for.
We were chatting a little bit on the bike, and I was asking you about how you get into cycling and whatnot, but how does it compare with running, the discipline and the culture of the two sports?
I think it is slightly different. I mean, obviously being an elite athlete, then life is very different. It becomes your career, your whole life really, and everything that you do around it is focused on that. Coming into cycling for me has been more about socialising, finding a new sport to challenge myself at, the fitness element, and just being involved in something unknown. I wasn't able to marry up the two when I was an athlete because it wasn't conducive to running, so different muscle groups, and that was the hardest thing that I found, is training for the cycling. Literally my legs felt like they're blowing up every time I got my bike. I was like, I know I've been retired for a long time, but geez. And so for me, kind of those aspects. In terms of the discipline and in terms of what you get out of cycling, I mean, you get so much, and I can't say more, it's just different. You get that sense of learning, a beginner getting used to a bike, what type of bike, what helmet to wear, what clothes to wear, all of the signage that you have when you go on a group ride. I remember going on my first group ride and people were flapping their arms and I had no idea till I go down a big pothole and they're like, that's what I was pointing at. Okay, all right, so I picked that up quite quick, and it's just things like that you learn and you feel empowered because you're getting better and better. Then you learn to ride the bike more effectively, get more confidence, and I can see progression in myself on a bike only after a couple of months, and I like that feeling personally.
Well, sorry, can I ask, Kelly, you're obviously a competitive person. I mean, do you have any sort of competitive drive when it comes to cycling? Is there anything you think you might like to do just to test yourself, to give yourself something to aim at?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I haven't been on many group rides, and when I have gone out with people, of course, everyone's different, and in my head, I'm like, yeah, all right, I can get quite good at this, and then you get someone like power past you out the hill, and like, geez, and I really respect that because it gives me a sense of where I need to get to, and I am a person that likes to get better. I did Ride 46, which was the new London ride, so they had Ride 100, but they had Ride 46 for more novice and beginners. I joined that, had a semi-pro girl with me and loved every minute of it. I rode faster than I'd ever ridden before. I learnt so much about being in a competition and was totally bowled over with kind of how I felt, free, and the environment and the culture. I can't say that I'm going to become a professional rider or anything, but if I get better, I'll enter more events, and then of course they will set me the standard that I'm at, and then if I want to go to the next level, I'll train hard for it.
And you have set yourself a challenge though, haven't you? A crazy 700-kilometre challenge coming up. I mean, what's that about? That's not taking it easy.
The girl, Alexis, that rode with me in Ride 46, I said she's semi-pro, and she goes out with another group of girls, and they're going to South Africa in March to do the Tour of Good Hope. She asked me would I like to do it, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then she sent me all the details. Oh my God. And I went out with them last week, and I've got a lot of work to do, put it that way. But again, it's such a big challenge. But the difference in me now is that I can't give 100% to it. I'm not going to become, just a cyclist. I do motivational speaking. That's my main thing. I have my cafe that we're here at. I run my charity. And so I can only just fit it in, but it gives me a goal. I think it's important for people to go, right, okay, I've set myself a goal, I'm going to have to train to get better, and that's the goal.
Well, Orla, I've survived my first women's sportive.
Only just, Richard. You've been clutching your hip there in some pain, but I was pushing you quite hard, wasn't I?
It's a historic injury. Well, I enjoyed meeting Kelly Holmes for the first time. She's fairly, you and her, it was like an unstoppable force of positivity meets an irresistible object of enthusiasm.
That's got to be the title of this month's podcast.
She's a bit overwhelming.
She's just brilliant, isn't she? She's so passionate and positive. I think she'd probably be that with anything that she get into, but she's really, really into her cycling, and she's talking about starting this virtual club all around the country and just getting more people hooking up with each other in different areas local to them, getting out riding. She just really seems to love the sport, given that she's so late to it.
Well, I detected real enthusiasm for it. Even when we were speaking off air, as it were, she was talking about, maybe dipping her toe in the competitive waters. But that remote club idea sounded like a great one, a great initiative.
I think it's brilliant, and I think it's one as well that probably would suit women more than anything else. Everyone kept talking about how strong camaraderie is when women cycle together, and how uncompetitive it is. And that's not to say that there weren't some really good women there today who were riding really hard, but there isn't that competitive edge. And I think what she was talking about in the virtual clubs, just meeting up with people to go out on rides rather than having to be part of a club, because a club situation can be quite intimidating as well, because that comes with its own culture, its own standards, its aesthetics, all the rest of it. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, that we were pulled up after the last episode by somebody, weren't we, for the enthusiasm that even I was accused of being enthusiastic.
I think that's a first, Richard. Yeah, somebody on Twitter said that they struggled with my positivity, and it sounded like that even you were having fun while we chatted. So maybe we should dial down on that. Let's introduce some gloom, shall we?
Get Daniel on. Daniel's deeply suspicious of really positive people.
Yeah, and yet we learned that his favourite film is The Wedding Crashers. Who knew? So I think there's a secret Pollyanna within Daniel Fries.
He hides it well. He hides it well. So that was a fun day out in the Kent countryside, wasn't it, Orla?
Beautifully enunciated, Richard.
So concentrate.
Kent countryside.
Had to concentrate on that. But it was a fun day out, wasn't it?
It was really good fun. I loved it. And what Specialized are doing with that is really good, actually, doing this series of women's only rides across the country, and with their cycling leaders, their ambassadors, if you like. Because it's just a great excuse to get a load of girls out on their bikes. What was brilliant about that day is there was such a range of ability. There was one woman there who borrowed, I think, a mountain bike to come out just because she wanted to ride with Dame Kelly Holmes. Not me. I have my own road bike, although bless it, it's not used very much.
She wanted to ride with.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's entirely implausible. So yeah, it was really good to get such a range of abilities, and everybody just really enjoyed it. It was great.
Quite mentally exhausting the day. I had to lie down in a darkened room afterwards.
I heard that. You're saying that like it's a joke, but your wife said you did have to lie down in a dark room and be brought foodstuffs.
Well, it was just, How
was it mentally exhausting?
Tiring. I found you and Kelly Holmes together quite exhausting, overwhelming.
I'll try not to be offended by that, but you've kind of broken my spirit. I think it's a compliment. Oh, is it?
It's a compliment. Yeah, there was a lot of energy.
Yeah,
a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I loved it.
Which contrasted nicely with my lack of either of these things.
You loved it.
I did. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
Thank you very much to Rapha for sponsoring the Cycling Podcast Féminin as they do the Cycling Podcast. Very grateful to them for their support.
Yeah, so from a woman's only ride in the Kent countryside, Richard, maybe next time we can get you on a woman's only cycling holiday in Europe. What do you think? Pack your kilt and off we go.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is a direction I want to be taking in the future. I think it was a one-off. Kent was a one-off.
Okay.
It was fun.
Yeah.
But, don't want to make a habit of it.
But on to Girona.
Girona, which is, of course, a bit of a cycling mecca. A lot of professionals live there. Male and female professionals live there. Marijn de Vries is one of them. And she recently ran her first ever women's training camp. And as I mentioned at the start, Nathalie Thomas went there and kept a little audio diary for us. So will we go straight to Girona?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing this, actually. I think women's only sporting holidays are a great idea, and I think lots of us toy with the idea and don't really commit. So I'm really excited to hear how they got on.
I'm Nathalie Thomas. I've just squeezed the last of my cycling gear into my suitcase, ready for a 2-day women's-only cycling camp in the province of Girona in northern Spain. I'm going with 2 friends, Amy Maguire and Louise Malone, and we are going to be led during our trip by ex-Dutch pro Marijn de Vries and her partner Frank Lankman, who run camps for both men and women out there, but we've chosen to do a women's-only camp. We have very different levels between us of experience. Amy's just ridden in cleats and clip pedals for the first time last weekend. Louise, on the other hand, has just come back from a 4-day charity fundraising trip through the French Alps, whereas I've done events such as l'Étape du Tour and the Liège-Bastogne-Liège Cyclo-Sportive, but those were a few years ago now, so I'm very much looking forward to getting back out on the bike abroad in Spain, just getting some bike fitness and some tips from a former pro. Tell us where we are.
We are in Girona.
No, we're in Barcelona.
Oh my god!
We're in Barcelona. Where are we going?
We are going to Girona, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah.
We're going to Girona. We also have Amy here.
Hello.
How are you feeling, Amy, about your first training camp?
Very excited.
Is that a true reflection of your feelings?
Absolutely not. Looking forward to wine.
Looking forward to wine. But what are we going to do over the 3 days?
Drink wine.
Apart from drink wine.
More wine.
We're gonna climb some hills on our bike.
Yes. So we can eat cake.
Yes.
Nice and delicious.
So we're in the van now with Frank. So how far away are we from Girona? How long does it take to get from Barcelona?
I've got absolutely no idea. I do have an idea, but we might get in traffic over there because it's a Friday night. So, but it's still, normally it's an hour drive, 90k, somewhere around that. Yeah.
And for how many years have you been coming to Girona then? How do you know this area? Because you're Dutch originally, aren't you?
Yeah. We are actually, my girlfriend, Marijn, she is doing the pro, she did as pro cyclist, and she came along for like 5, maybe 6 years already, and then we started to figure out an idea to live in wintertime in Girona and in summertime in Holland, so yeah, and this is it.
So is Girona a kind of hub for pro cyclists, is that?
Yeah, I think at the moment there's over 100 paid pro cyclists living in Girona.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah.
Any big names who?
The Dutch guys like Geesink, and he won the Queen's ride in the Vuelta last week.
Oh right, okay.
And the other one is Steven Kruiswijk, and loads of them. Simon Gerrans,
yes,
for example.
The Australian guy.
Yeah, he's an Australian, yeah. But loads of the guys from Orica, a few guys from Trek. I think half of the team of Cannondale is living in Girona. Yeah. And Lance Armstrong introduced it into the pro peloton. He lived here for like 6 years in the main time that he won all the Tour de France.
So what makes it so good? Is it there are lots of climbs? What?
Yeah, it's not actually the big that we don't have big climbs, but it's and you will see in the next few days. It's so car friendly. Like if you go from, for example, from the Goes to Girona, like we do tomorrow. As soon as you start climbing, or as soon as you go inland from the main road, there's nearly cars
No
anymore.
cars,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Well, quite funny is that as soon as you see a car, you will notify that they are so friendly. They just ride behind you for like 10 minutes if you have to. And they're not horning, they're not waving, they're not doing anything. And then as soon as you want to order a cup of coffee in a restaurant, you see how grumpy the people are. So, yeah.
What are we doing today then, Marijn?
So today we'll be doing a really nice coast ride. Actually, this is one of my favorite rides here because the road we are going to do is a very special one. It's in the top 10 of best roads in Europe, maybe even in the world. And you will see why, because it gives a different view every time. We'll be riding along the sea. It's up and down. It's actually a pretty hard road, but it's super, super pretty. So from here we'll be riding to Tossa de Mar. That's where we will have coffee and cake, of course. Then we go a bit inland and we come back over a climb called Sant Grau. The descent is super, super beautiful because you will have a view over the Mediterranean all the time. And then we do the last bit of coast road we already did in the morning. But from the other side, it will give a totally different feel and view. And when we're back, we'll be having like 80k, I think.
80k?
And around 1500 altitude meters. We've got the time, so there's no need to rush. You can also stop to look for the view and take some photos, and it's all about enjoying ourselves.
And what kind of tips would you give to relatively sort of new cyclists, like, you know, who's just using cleats for the first time? And
yeah, well, there's not so much traffic here. We've got to ride out of town first, so we'll be a bit busier. Just take your time. If you want to click out, make sure you've got plenty of space, and just don't freak out. You will manage. Keep looking at the horizon. Don't necessarily look at your front wheel or at the street. Your leg will know how to get to the ground, like on a normal bike. Just try and practice. If you're not too sure, click out way early before. And I will tell when we are going to stop, and I will tell it meters before we have to stop. So you've got the time. Also on the coast road, like I said, it's up and down all the time. If you don't want to be tired at the end of the road already, keep a high gear, so a high cadence when you ride uphill, and try to, when it goes uphill, try not to go too fast, because that's what a lot of people do, and then you get lactic. Some words are so hard to pronounce in English. Lactic acid in your legs straight away. So there's no need to rush. We've got the time. So this little town is called Monets. I'd like to tell more about the history, but I don't know much more than that they've got good coffee here and good cake.
And it's absolutely stunning. We're in a beautiful little stone courtyard with stone houses all around, being welcomed by a lovely little dog.
This is one of the most beautiful spots in this area. We're on a hilltop now, and you can see to all sides. And what's so special about this hilltop is at the right hand side you see the Mediterranean, and at the left hand side you see the Pyrenees. So I think for you this is also a great area to test yourself a little, riding uphill, riding downhill. You've got really good views here, and it's not hard to see what's coming in front of you. So I think this is a great weekend to learn to ride your bike a little bit better. What do you think of it yourself?
I think it's great because in the UK we have so much traffic, so and there's a lot of stopping and starting at traffic lights. You're having to weave in and out of traffic a little bit, so you also don't have such long downhill stretches, so this kind of thing can be challenging if you're not so comfortable going downhill, you have to really learn how to corner, whereas in the UK you can pretty much just bomb it down and hope for the best. It's short, you know. But it's definitely
a good area to get more comfortable on your bike, I guess. If you're doing a long event, it's all about making long hours on your bike, because I think the biggest challenge will be saddle sore, for example. And if you ride your bike a lot, that also gets a lot better. So you all are really fit. I can tell you've got good core stability, so that's not really a thing you have to practice. You can always do that because it's good for your body anyway. But I think it's all about just riding your bike and doing long distances. And also, like here in hilly terrain, can also help to ride up a hill as fast as you can. Then recover again in a downhill, and the next hill, ride up as fast as you can. That makes a good interval, also makes you stronger. So you can mix it up a little, doing longer rides and doing some interval rides. Always make sure that you do like 80% endurance, so longer rides, and only 20% is more intense. That's the best way to build up endurance and strength. That's what I would recommend. Just ride your bike a lot.
So we have just reached the centre of Girona.
Opa.
Identify yourself.
Oh, I'm Louise, the incompetent person. So we were just arrived in the centre of Girona to a bottle of cava, which couldn't be more apt for us ladies. There we go. Woo-hoo.
That's a nice one.
The sun is shining. It's a beautiful, beautiful day.
Hey, and well done, girls!
Yay.
Fantastic! I hope you enjoyed today.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Cheers. Great trip.
Thumbs up?
Very much thumbs up. Yeah.
What would you say was a highlight for you, Amy? I mean, it's different for you because obviously you hadn't been riding very much beforehand, but what do you think you've sort of...
I think just the scenery. And the beauty of Spain. I mean,
so who fancies a bit more?
Yes, please.
Oh, go on then.
Would be a waste to throw it away.
Has it helped build up your confidence, though?
Absolutely, yeah. I think just getting advice and tips, and then just riding. I think riding with other women really helps, because you can watch how they do things and follow. Like following you guys was really, really good.
And I guess maybe not always such a competitive element.
Yeah, it's more encouragement rather than competitive.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful about riding with women, because they take care of each other. Whereas men try to outrace each other. I think it's a bit of a stereotype, but I think it's true. In general, women really take care of each other on the bike. And that's what I like so much about it.
Yeah.
And I think to get a really positive experience on the bike, you know, with the scenery, the different terrain, the safety on the roads. The roads are very smooth, there's no cars, you don't have to worry about it. So it just gives you a completely different experience of riding, of cycling, than if you, like me, just commute in London. So this is just not comparable, to me this is the true cycling. So it's a very positive experience, and I'll be back.
You got you.
to true cycling then.
To true cycling.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
So that was Nathalie Thomas's audio diary from Girona. Sounds like she had a great time.
Yeah, it sounded great. Natalie's someone who I was supposed to go out riding with, actually, a little while ago. We used to live in the same area, and after I had my daughter, Eve, she was trying to encourage me back on the bike, which I was going to do until she told me that she had ridden L'Étape de Tours and Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and I thought, maybe not.
She noticed you went quiet. Was that
That's
the
why
reason?
I was terrified.
She was wondering why you just started ignoring messages and stuff.
Just purely through being a chicken.
She's a runner, Natalie, as well. She's one of these people who does lots of things.
I know.
Does lots of stuff, very active.
Yeah, that scares me, you see.
Fit and healthy, game for anything. And, she does like her cycling, but it's not the only thing she does.
Yeah, and that's why those holidays, I think, are very interesting, because that's it's a kind of thing that attracts people who are into a little bit of everything and not necessarily just into cycling, but want to go away for a couple of days and be very active. And it's a nice way to get people into the sport. So it was interesting to hear.
Absolutely. Well, from Girona to Watford, or near as damn it, he lives in a little village north of London. Lionel Burney, colleague on the Cycling Podcast. Lionel with his monthly retro feature. Over to you, Lionel.
This month, at Orla's request, we're telling the story of Annie Londonderry, who is said to be the first woman to have cycled around the world. In 1894, two wealthy Bostonites waged a $20,000 bet that a woman could not travel around the globe by bike in 15 months. And Annie Cohen-Kopchowski, to give her real name, accepted the challenge in order to win $5,000 for herself. She took on the surname Londonderry so that she would not be identified as a Jew in places where anti-Semitism was a problem. Although it's also claimed she took on the name because it was that of a spring water company that was one of her numerous sponsors. Apparently she'd not even ridden a bicycle until a few days before departing in June 1894. She was 24 years old and she set off with only a change of clothes, a pistol and some maps. She was originally bound for San Francisco, but on reaching Chicago she turned back to New York and took a boat to Le Havre in France. She then rode down through France and took another boat to Egypt. It has to be said she took a lot of boats, and the detail of her route are sketchy in places, although it said she reached Japan before arriving back in San Francisco in March 1895. That gave her 6 months to get back to Boston, and she completed the trip 14 days inside the deadline, collecting her winnings, although even that detail is disputed, and some claim the whole venture was just to generate publicity, both for herself and for her sponsors. Her great-nephew Peter Zutelin tells the story in Around the World on Two Wheels, in which even he says that Annie's pace on the bike was often as little as 8 or 10 miles an hour. Slow, even considering the type of bike she was on and the road quality at that time. But regardless of how much she rode or how fast or even the route she took, Annie's feat was bold. Travelling round the world by bike in the 1890s was not something to be undertaken lightly.
Well, we heard there from Lionel Burney with this month's retro feature, and wow, that was a little bit different, wasn't it?
Yeah, Annie Londonderry is someone that I find absolutely inspiring. I've read about her quite a bit before, and leads quite nicely into our next section on endurance cyclists. But if you think back then, she hadn't even ridden a bicycle before. And this was in the Victorian ages. So women on bicycles were not exactly a common sight. She left her husband and 3 children behind to circumnavigate the globe. I mean, that in itself would be a bit of a taboo today to a certain extent. But certainly back then, she must have been an incredibly feisty woman. I think she's just fantastic.
You're a hero? Heroine?
She is. She is, because she did it her way. She was told really that she couldn't do it, that only men would be able to do that kind of thing. And like I say, leaving her kids behind, that must have been incredibly hard. And to overcome that kind of social barrier and social taboo to go off and do it. And yet she died in obscurity. How incredibly sad, until her story then was rediscovered. She's an inspiration.
Women were, and I've mentioned this before I'm sure, but in the 19th century, women were discouraged from riding bikes. Bikes were sort of symbols of freedom, weren't they? Emancipation.
And so women weren't seen to be fit to ride them, and it was a dangerous thing. It was subversive.
They were a threat to society and the social fabric.
And you couldn't ride your bicycle normally with skirts because they would get caught in the spokes, and so that was also something that they used to discourage women from riding them, because then
they invented culottes.
They did invent culottes for the bicycle, and I love a culotte, don't you? It's a good look.
Yeah.
I wore culottes for my confirmation when I was 12. So maybe my love of cycling actually stems from the sartorial history of the sport. Amazing things you learn
on the Cycling Podcast Féminin, isn't it?
It wasn't a good look, actually. I might revisit culottes in the modern day.
But it's fascinating to look back at that social history and to, obviously we talk about women's cycling every month in this podcast, and how things might be different had women's, because that's when men's racing started, of course, in the late 19th century. Had there been a women's scene, developing at the same time, there might be a very different story today in terms of the how the two branches of the sport, if you like, have developed, because men have got about an 80-90 year head start on the women.
Yeah, absolutely. And you wonder why that was. Obviously, she was a strong-minded woman, breaking with convention. What her reception was like when she came back, I imagine she was seen as a bit of a novelty story more than anything else. It's a shame that other women didn't look at what she did at the time and think, we could do that as well, and embrace the bicycle
just
as
armies
that symbol
of women riding around the world.
Well, why not? Yeah, just even for everyday life, you know. I mean, the bicycle as a vehicle of transport for women wasn't really considered to be viable until quite a bit later. So why shouldn't there be armies of women riding around the world? Bring it on.
No reason at all. No reason at all. Don't get me wrong.
He said that in such an old man kind of way.
Don't get me wrong. Listen, for our final interview this month, again, bit different. This is a bit of a different episode. We will return to normal business next month. We might take January off. I don't know. We haven't decided yet.
We haven't decided. But this is, speaking of armies of women riding around the world, here we go.
Nice segue. I should say before we go to this, though, that if you listen to the Cycling Podcast as well, you'll know about our friends scheme. Become a friend of the podcast for £10 and you will get 11 exclusive friends specials throughout the year.
That to me sounds like a marvellous Christmas present.
It's incredible. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but it's a great idea. But
you should do.
The reason for mentioning it on the Cycling Podcast Féminin is that in 2017 one of those friend specials will be on women's cycling, in acknowledgement of, you know, the Cycling Podcast Féminin and its huge success and large audience. We're going to think of something unusual, different. I mean, this year, 2016, we did friend specials, you know, with Chris Froome in the Lab. There was a special on Mont Ventoux. There was one on Flanders Fever. There was an audio diary kept by Joe Dombrowski at the Giro d'Italia, and several other subjects as well. We did a 10-year anniversary of Operation Puerto, lots of things. A special on Alberto Contador. But we might, maybe in 2017, our women's focused friend special will be perhaps an audio diary from a leading rider at the Giro Rosa, for example, or the women's tour, something like that. We'll work on that and come up with an idea and a plan.
Yeah, and if anybody has any ideas of what they'd like to listen
Great
to,
idea. Why should we do the work?
No, it's about participation with the audience, Richard.
Feedback.
But yeah, if you do have any ideas, then do just drop us a line at Sky Orla, at Richard Moore. Isn't that
73
at Richard Moore 73
Twitter
on Twitter, at the Cycling Podcast.
Or this cycling _podcast.
Sorry, I'll get it right.
Cycling _podcast. We're on Facebook as well. Just search for Cycling Podcast, the Cycling Podcast, and email contact@thecyclingpodcast.com. contact@thecyclingpodcast.com, and you can become a friend of the podcast at thecyclingpodcast.com for £10, or you can pay a little bit more if you want to support the Cycling Podcast and all the work that we do and going to races and so on. And we intend next year with the Cycling Podcast Féminin to go to more women's races as well. So
that'd be really good fun.
Yeah, we're well up for that, aren't we, Orla?
Well up for it.
We're well up for that. Recently, well, not that recently, a couple of months ago now, we went to an event in central London, Rapha London, in the cafe in Soho, where Emily Chappell and friends were talking to a large audience, a sold-out audience, about endurance riding. And there was people who are sort of end-to-end record breakers. There was Race Across America participants, Emily Chappell herself, Transcontinental Race. It's a really growing area, and they were all very interesting. In fact, we're going to try and line some of them up for future episodes. But it was a really fascinating evening with some remarkable women. A lot of them who, you know, lead pretty otherwise conventional lives with families and jobs, you know, and working in good jobs and fitting training around that. It was really quite impressive and interesting.
Yeah, it was. Let's have a listen.
My name's Emily Chappell and I'm a cyclist, first and foremost. I used to be a cycle courier in London. I've done a lot of long-distance bike touring. I've done some very cold journeys, and I'm now a long-distance racer. Well, yeah, Soho is very familiar to me. I can find my way anywhere in this small block of London without even really thinking. You know, I know all the streets, I know all the corners. I know where all the potholes and the dropped curbs are and everything like that. And I almost sometimes forget the names of the streets because it's just a matter of you turn left, you turn right, you go that way, you lean to turn. Your body knows almost as much as your mind does. So London is deeply, deeply familiar to me. It's almost like a pair of shoes that you've worn in, and you fit into, and your body knows them and the shoes know your body. It's that sort of familiarity, because I was here every day for 3 years, and then I went away for a bit, and then I was here every day for another couple of years. So I know London extremely well. Ultimately, it was just for the love of cycling that I became a courier. Lots and lots of other reasons. I mean, the practical reasons of needing a job and not finding any other. But I'd been looking at couriers for years when I was doing all my other things and thinking, I wish I could be doing that. Look at them, they're just riding around all day, whereas I'm sitting here at my desk waiting for 5 o'clock when I can go and ride around for 2 hours. And they look so cool, and they're having so much fun, and they're so beautiful and graceful the way they move in and out of the traffic. And so eventually I gave in and became one. And although, couriering is a really hard job, and it grinds people down, and a lot of people become very dark and negative if they've been doing it for a bit too long. And I had my share of ups and downs, but I never stopped loving cycling. And that was really what kept me going through it. And you'd be exhausted on Friday evening, but by Monday morning, I would wake up and think, great, I get to go to work again and ride my bike all day. Who else can say that about Monday morning? There aren't many female couriers. There are a few. I think like a lot of industries, it's very, very male dominated. The few female couriers there are tend to stand out because they're female. They also tend to stand out because they're quite good. I don't know, but I think this is because if you're a woman in a typically male industry, you tend to feel like you've got something to prove and try quite hard to prove it. I certainly did. But one thing I really loved about the courier industry is it's male dominated, but it's not sexist. And that was so refreshing because so much of the world is, and so much of the world around me, like the men in the street and the guys in the post rooms and some of the cabbies, I saw the worst of people. But within the industry, the other couriers, they just treated you like you were a courier. If you rode a bike, you carry the loads on your back, you're out there 5 days a week, you're a courier. Not a girl, not a boy, just a courier. It is a fellowship. Again, for different reasons. I think one of the most powerful reasons is that couriers aren't always very popular. We do a job that's very, very demanding, and there's quite a lot of hardship. And also, a lot of people don't like us. We're sort of typecast as these hooligans. And some are hooligans, most actually aren't. But there is this sense of it's us against the world, and we've got to look out for each other because maybe not anyone else will look out for us. So there's that aspect to it. And then just the fact that there are other people who understand what you're going through. You are suffering a lot sometimes. Or even the highs as well. You have these massive highs from riding your bike. Anyone else will not quite understand why that's such a great thing. But the other couriers will. It was something I'd had in mind secretly for a lot longer than I actually admitted. I'd been kind of watching it, and 2014 I was aware of it on social media. I knew it was going on, and I was totally ignoring it because I wasn't interested at all, not even slightly. And then eventually I realised I was in denial and I really was interested, and was very scared because it's a huge undertaking. And it felt like a very big step up from anything I'd done before. Because bike touring is easy. You do like 60 miles a day. You can go slowly. You spend 10 hours in your tent at night. It's actually not hard. And I wasn't sure if I was actually that sort of rider, that sort of athlete. But I sort of gave myself this goal. And even without quite meaning it, you start to work towards it. And I started doing longer and longer and longer rides. And then I did it. And even though the first year I only got about halfway, I just realised this is what I'm made for. All the things I've done have prepared me for this. Because couriering had prepared me to get up every single day and go out on my bike. No matter how awful I felt, if I was ill or hungover or just not in the mood, tired, you still have to go out. So I was good at just getting up and doing it every single day. And all the skills I'd picked up from touring, all the resourcefulness and the finding your way in foreign countries and dealing with foreign food and not being able to speak foreign languages and all of those little skills, I've been doing that for years. I've slept in all kinds of weird places, and that doesn't hold any fear for me. I'm now more comfortable sleeping in the corner of a field than I am in my own bed. So I had some massive advantages from that perspective. And then the cycling, it's just riding a bike. And I'd started to do some big kind of, 400, 600k rides in the year leading up to it and realised I could do it. There were a few bits of it I hadn't done, but I was sure I could fill in those gaps. The Transcontinental is a race across Europe. It's between 3,500 and 4,000 kilometres. They change the course every year. So there's no set route. There's a start point and an end point and 4 checkpoints. But in between those, you design your own route. So it's not just a test of strength and speed. It's also about skill and strategy, how much time you've spent preparing, how much research you've done, if you've done any recce's, how well you know yourself. You might pick the hillier roads because you can gain an advantage there, or you might go for the flatter ones because there's a headwind there, a tailwind there rather. And it's a completely unsupported race. So it's non-stop. There's no stages, no stops. You just start at the start, finish at the end. And you're on your own. You're not allowed to have anyone following you in a car or a camper van. You're not allowed to have food drops or kit drops or plan any of your support ahead. You've just got to deal with what's there. So you're eating, you can eat from McDonald's, you can eat from Lidl, you can eat from Michelin star restaurants if you want. Some guys do every night in a hotel. I mostly don't, but sometimes I did because you get a bit of a better rest and you can wash your kit and so forth. And you busk it, basically. So when I'm not in a hotel, I'm in a sleeping bag, which is in a bivvy bag, which is in the corner of a field somewhere. And that actually for me is one of my favourite bits. You cycle until you are exhausted. And people have different approaches to sleep. So some people will just sleep for 90 minutes a day, which is a bit seat of the pants. Some people give themselves a full 8 hours. I would go for 4, 3 to 4 hours. So you cycle till maybe 2 a.m. when it's dark, everything is quiet, and you're so tired you're about to fall off the bike. And then you find a nice bit of grass, maybe under a tree, the corner of a field, whatever you fancy. And you get your stuff off your bike, you get into your sleeping bag, you lie down, and you have this blissful minute and a half of lying there, feeling your body just sinking into the ground with relief. You look up at the stars. And in a lot of parts of Europe, you can see quite a lot of stars because there weren't many cities around. It was really dark. And then you pass out and it's blissful. And then waking up in the morning, you often wake up and the dawn's just breaking, and that's magical too. I'm doing the Transcontinental again. And it's funny because whenever I mention this, people are surprised. And they say, "You're doing it again then? Really? Oh, okay." And I just think, well, why wouldn't I? It's such an amazing race. It's so much fun. And it's different every year. So at the moment, it's about a month until they announce the checkpoints for next year. And that's going to be like Christmas. It really is, because there'll be some blog post or email where you find out where the checkpoints are going to be. And then you look them up and you think, wow, I get to go over that mountain pass. I get to go through that country. So there's that excitement. Every year it's a new adventure. And although I did okay this year, and I certainly did better than I did last year, and I feel like I've improved as an athlete, I can see so many ways I can do better next year. And I want to try and get into the top 10 overall next year. I don't know if that's actually possible. There's some really, really good riders in this year, but there's a lot of improvements I need to make. So I'm already thinking, right, okay, so I need to improve my speed, my strength. I need to work on my route finding. It's a whole year of just kind of working towards this goal, but having quite a lot of fun as I do it, because every ride you do builds up towards it. So that's what's immediately next.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
Yeah, thank you again to our sponsor Rapha, and before that you heard Emily Chappell talking about her life in bikes, I suppose, from couriering to aborted round the world exploits, and then Transcontinental Race, which I think she's planning to do again in 2017, and very, very interesting stuff. Like, tempted, Orla?
In another dimension,
Life.
I would love to. I really would love to. I think there's something so attractive about dedicating yourself to an endeavour like that. The mental strength that it would necessitate, but also build up, more so than the physical strength. I think the physical strength is something that would just come. But I think as an exercise in psychological strength building, it would be wonderful. One thing I did notice though with all the ladies who were chatting that night is that none of them have kids, and that's not to say that you wouldn't be able to do it with children, but going back to Annie Londonderry,
weigh you down though a bit, wouldn't they?
Well, that's what's difficult, doing that juggle if you've got a full-time job and then you're coming home to be a mum and then trying to justify getting time out on your bike. It's quite difficult, but it is something that I'd love to do in the long term, definitely. Yeah, I'd love to.
Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe take your recording device with you.
I might just do that.
And make us a podcast. Come back with a podcast.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Wherever you go, wherever you end up. Well, listen, that's all for this episode, and that's all for 2016.
Yeah, I know. It's been lovely. I'd like to just, on a festive note of Thanksgiving, don't pull a face, Richard. I want to thank everyone for listening over the last 7 episodes. We've had some wonderful feedback for this podcast, and I think we started this as a bit of an unknown enterprise, given that we were focusing solely on women's cycling, whether there be an audience for it, an appetite, and there certainly seems to be one, and I don't know how much our audience knew about women's cycling beforehand. I think a lot of them did know quite a bit, and hopefully we're bringing people along on our journey as we learn a little bit more and learn more about the stories and the narrative through women's cycling. So thank you very much for listening, everyone, and thank you for the feedback. It's been lovely.
We've had a great start. You know, these things do take time to build, but we've the audience is there, very similar audience numbers to our regular podcast, which is great, and I think slowly making inroads into the community of women's cycling, which is obviously it's part of the wider cycling community, but also quite distinct as well. So it's a process, but hopefully we're getting there. And as Orla said, thanks very much for all the feedback. Much appreciated. It's great fun to do. I've really enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed it. It's been brilliant.
It's been fun learning about something that's quite new to me a lot of the time. So that's all for 2016, and we'll be back in 2017. And as promised, we can't let people down having promised this at the start. As promised,
will you sing along?
We'll play out with.
Let's do a bit of Shakin'
We'll
Stevens.
play out with Orla's Christmas song. What song are you going to sing?
What would you like? What would you like?
It's like a jukebox.
What about if I cop out by giving you a little blast of Slade? It's Christmas!
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
That's terrible. People are going to feel shortchanged.
I can't now. Snow is falling.